Hello, I'm Keith Spera from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. Welcome to Let's Talk. My guest today is a triple threat. He's a blues-based guitarist and songwriter, an actor who co-starred alongside George Clooney in the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, and the author of a meticulously researched book that argues blues music originated in Louisiana, not Mississippi. His latest album is called Big Gray Sky. Here to talk about all that and more is Chris Thomas King. Chris, thank you for being here, man.
My pleasure.
So let's jump right into it. Let's just talk about this book. Came out a year or two ago. It's called The Blues, The Authentic Narrative of My Music and Culture. Why are you trying to take the blues away from Mississippi? Those people don't have a lot, man. Give them the blues. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, I've done so much over the years for Mississippi, documentaries, movies. I was instrumental in the research to establish the B.B. King Blues Museum in his hometown and help, raise money for that. And I've done so much for Mississippi, but I felt at a certain point, what have I done for my home state? And I began writing a book that would be a memoir about growing up in my dad's juke joint, Tabby's Blues Box. And as I began to try to put that story together, I realized that the blues didn't have a history. And the book that I thought I was writing, I had to shelve that, and then I delved into all these myths and legends. Did Robert Johnson really sell his soul at the crossroads in the Delta? And so I went into this whole thing to try to uncover all these myths that we have. And I found that in northern Mississippi, where they say the blues began, it wasn't African Americans wasn't even there. It was Native American land, until after the Civil War. So, long story short, the blues really developed here in Louisiana in the 1890s, and the family, Rudolph Desdunes' kids, one of them named Mamie Desdunes, is one of the earliest composers that we know. Her 219 blues is something Jelly Roll Martin said he heard when he was a kid. And we're talking about way back. Yeah, and so at that time, there were really no African American or black people in what we call the Mississippi Delta in northern Mississippi. And those plantations that people see in the Delta, those are 20th century plantations, but people in their mind, they think that it has something to do with antebellum.
Right, pre-Civil War or whatever,
yeah.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because, yes, the blues, maybe more than any other genre, has so many myths attached to it. And, you hear these stories repeated and they become fact. So, I mean, but as you mentioned, there really was no authoritative history that did the deep research to decide, right. These stories that have been passed on by certain folklorists or what have you, are these things actually true? So this book, you research it. There's a heck of a lot of footnotes in here.
Yeah, over 350, notes, so this is just not my opinion. And, but I would say for the listener who might be interested in this story, the definition of the blues that Mississippi has is not the same definition as Louisiana, and that's what people might understand a little better if I give the two definitions. The definition in Louisiana has to do with blue laws, where they had no gambling on Sunday, you can't buy wine, no dancing,
right.
No blue activity, no blue language.
No fun.
Yes.
No fun on Sundays. Right.
And so the blues is kind of a French Creole word from the word like sacre bleu, which means holy S, you know what I mean? Meaning that when they're coming out of the juke joint on a Saturday, after a Saturday night party into Sunday morning, and the churchgoers are going to church, they say that they're playing the blues or the devil's music. But that's the New Orleans definition of that is more of a French version, like blue entertainment or blue music. When the musicians left Louisiana after Storyville and went to Chicago and Harlem, and they called their music the such and such a blues, the Basin Street blues, the St. Louis blues, whatever, yep. Then people up north made that translation, a false translation, that in their definition in the Anglo language, it means down in the dumps, depressed, and all of this. But we don't do that even at funerals.
Right. And we put the fun in funeral.
Right, and even on our most religious holiday, it's okay to drink wine and dance and have a party and have the music go on all night until the early morning. That's our culture. So my story that I'm trying to tell to Louisiana, and I've been lecturing at different universities that have invited me, is that we have to tell our own unique story, and we have to hold on to our own definitions, and not let Mississippi or the Northeastern American scholars or whatever define our culture.
Right.
I mean, it's called gumbo. It's not seafood soup.
It's not seafood. Did somebody call it that? Seafood soup?
Well, I'm saying we got to hold on.
We got to hold on to that gumbo.
It
right.
has meaning. So when I say the blues, it means something different than Mississippi. But Mississippi and the Virginias and the blues is played all over the world now. It's just popular music, but it's like tea. I mean, there's a tea, you might want it unsweet or stronger or something to relax by, or you want something that gives you a little caffeine and picks you up. So there's all kind of different styles of the blues and all kind of different names for it, but we have to understand that it all stems from our culture, and it began here in the 1890s. And yeah.
And that's where it goes from there. Well, in the book, I mean, the book is part research, history of the blues, but it's also a memoir. It's also your personal history. And you, more than just about anyone, has roots in the blues. As you mentioned, your dad, Tabby Thomas, legendary bluesman up in Baton Rouge. Tabby's Blues Box was, renowned blues club up there in Baton Rouge.
For 25 years.
For 25 years, which is no more. What do you remember? I mean, because you started playing in your dad's band as a child, as a boy, right? Started playing rhythm guitar. I mean, you were like, look at my son, look what he can do, kind of deal. Like at 7, 8, 9 years old.
Right. Yeah. So I've been playing. I mean, a lot. Even though there are some musicians who, are older than I am and still working in this genre. But my career dates back further than a lot of these folks. I think I made my first trip to Europe playing the blues like 1981.
Oh, when you were like what, in your teens?
Still in my teens. And the unique thing about me, Keith, is that, and what drove me even to kind of want to do this research, is that I was brought into the business not as a commercial artist. I was brought in by folklorists. And so the Smithsonian Institute is kind of like discovered me. I was the last discovery of the 20th century. When I say discovery,
what does that mean? What does that mean?
Yeah, these folklorists will go out to the prisons and go out to these places and find some primitive version of black music, and they would record that and document it and all this kind of stuff here. It wasn't meant for MTV or Soul Train,
Right.
It was meant for museums and cultural brokers, And they were into primitivism of black music. And I was the last one of a long line of musicians who were brought into that world. And it was a crazy effing world, man. It's like, what the hell? I'm trying to get the Soul Train, and y'all trying to take me up to the Smithsonian and display me like I'm some kind of artifact.
Right.
And it was just, I had to find a way out of that. And so even this book is even it starts with the history, but then it ends up, telling my own story, me and my dad, and the struggles of our family trying to keep a juke joint open. But it was a journey to find out who I am or what because it never made sense to me, the way the blues was framed,
right, as
being a primitive music, and I'm supposed to be a primitive musician. Just by writing a book, I think I proved everybody I'm not a blues musician, because you're supposed to be literate, you know what I mean? And then you're authentic. So I have not fit into the criteria or the box of the Ivy League, folklorists, even though they're the ones who introduced me to the world. And I've had some breaks along the way, like you say, getting into Hollywood and doing movies and things helped me to kind of find a little elbow room to just be an artist, as opposed to trying to live up to those false narratives.
Right, to play character almost. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so where we are now with the blues, I think that, because people always like to say the music is dying out, and what was dying out is the sharecropper. What's dying out is the guy who picked cotton, and it's like, if you didn't pick cotton, then you're not a real blues musician. And that's why New Orleans have always been kind of eliminated from the story, because great musicians that I admire over the years, who really is the father of the blues guitar, Lonnie Johnson, who is from New Orleans, he never picked cotton, but he was an urban, bohemian type of guy. But he is the one who inspired Robert Johnson and inspired all these guitar players and Buddy Guy and B.B. King and Eric Clapton and everybody else. It all starts with Lonnie Johnson.
A guy from New Orleans.
From New Orleans.
Not from the cotton fields of Mississippi.
Exactly. Right. And in the 1960s, when these folklorists decided to reframe this music, and I'm not going to go into all of that because we don't have time, mm-hmm. their motivations, mm-hmm. but they pushed him away and didn't give him the proper due that he needed, and they would rather go to illiterate musicians, sharecroppers like the Muddy Waters and things. Not taking anything away from being illiterate and being a sharecropper. It's not that's just the way life was.
Yeah.
But that's not the definition of Louisiana culture. It's not the definition of the way we express ourselves in Louisiana. Like I said, why on a Saturday night will we be in the French Quarter down in the dumps and depressed unless you don't have anybody to go home with, what I mean? Or a dancing partner.
Right.
So our culture is totally different from the other 49 states. And I think that it's important that we define our own culture and then tell the world who we are instead of the opposite.
Exactly, letting the world tell us who we are.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. You talked earlier about you wanted to get to Soul Train, you wanted to get to MTV, and you tried different things along the way. I mean, you made traditional blues records, but you also did a lot of hip hop influenced records, mm-hmm. Which obviously there was a commercial element to doing that. Mm-hmm. The irony, I think, of your career is that the thing that brought you the most fame and put you on the biggest stages was playing traditional music via the Oh Brother Where Art Thou project and the tour that followed up. Which for those who don't know, the movie, I think it was 2000. Set in Mississippi, ironically enough. Blues doesn't come from there, but the movie was set there. You and Clooney, you guys are on Lamb in the 1920s, I think it was set, and you played
Depression era.
Yeah, Depression era. You played a bluesman that they encounter along the way and go. But then the soundtrack album became an enormous hit, and I think you had one song on the first soundtrack album that came out, the Down from the Mountain project, right?
Yeah, the Down from the Mountain album that was recorded at the Ryman, it sold 1 million copies, and I wrote a song called John Law Burned on a Liquor Store, which a lot of bluegrass bands still do to this day. And it brought me acclaim, and it brought me a new audience, and it helped me transcend, this narrow blues audience that I was, kind of locked into. And by doing that, I ended up, developing an audience that kind of like, by transcending that, it just kind of gave me an audience where I had a little more room as an artist to if I want to do hip hop blues, which a lot of people frowned upon, or bring DJs into it. It's like, to break all the rules, which is fun to do. I mean, that's what people I admire, like Miles Davis, certain artists, you don't let the critics or you don't let, people define you. You're the artist, you're painting that picture, so you have to go out there on a limb, because that's where the fruit are, that's where you're going to get the good stuff. But the other thing about Oh Brother, and then I followed it up with the movie Ray, where I did the score of the Ray movie with Ray Charles. He was still alive.
And it starred Jamie Foxx as playing Ray Charles.
Yeah,
right?
Jamie won an Oscar for that. And that's not Jamie singing and playing the piano in that movie. That's Ray Charles. I was sitting next to him in the studio when he did it.
Sitting next to Ray?
Yeah. We were working together. And I recorded several tunes for the Ray Charles album. I still haven't been paid for it, but that's a whole nother story.
Well. Perhaps we'll talk about that later.
But, that's some dark corners of the music business. But it was an amazing one of my most amazing journeys was working in the studio with Ray and working on the soundtrack. And then I got to play in the movie Lo Folsom, who gave Ray his big break. So as an actor and everything. I think I've done about a dozen movies, but Ray and Oh Brother Where Art Thou were the bigger successes, and I still do some soundtrack scoring and things like that. But I tell you, man, that was when when people went to the store to buy the DVD to the Ray movie, or they went and bought the album, like 10 million sales or more of Oh Brother Wart Thou, people were paying $17 a pop for a CD.
Yep.
And the business that we're in today, if you can get $17 from streaming, you're doing good.
Right. It only takes like 1 billion streams
Exactly.
to get $17 or something like that.
Yeah. So we're in a whole different place musically, but I think that I used to, when I was living in New Orleans before I was washed out by Katrina, I haven't been able. I thought I'd be out for just a year or something, and didn't make my way back. It didn't happen. I'm still in Prairieville, Louisiana.
Still in Prairieville, right.
And that's why I can probably write books and do a lot of things, because I don't have a lot of distractions.
Really? Prairieville not as hopping as New Orleans? No? I'll take that as a no. Right?
Yeah, so I lost my train of thought.
Well, no, you said that's why you're able to write the book, because you're in Prairieville, and it's a much more peaceful place to be and create, I guess.
Yeah.
But no, and we were talking about the music business. I mean, you've got a bunch of your CDs here. I mean, the physical CDs. Your new one, Big Gray Sky. You're not even doing a physical copy of it. It's all just just a virtual version, an online version of it. Correct?
That's right. The new album, Big Gray Sky, is really the first kind of like a trilogy. I have a lot of music that I've recorded. Like I said, not having a lot of distractions, I can get a lot of work done. But I have about 35 songs or so that I'm ready to release. And I was like, do I release them as a triple album or some double thing or whatever? And I said, no, I'll release them, separately. So this is like the first of a trilogy that I'm doing. There's no big storyline, anything between it. But the albums are going to come out in pretty quick succession. So the second album, probably will be out the first of the year, and then the third album, which I'm really excited about. Not that I'm not excited about Big Gray Sky, but the blues audience, you got to spoon feed them a little bit, because I'll just blow their minds if I just give them the whole thing,
Right.
So I got to give them a little bit at a time so they can follow me. But but it's a trilogy. But this is the first one, Big Gray Sky, and what this is doing, oh brother, I'm playing acoustic guitar, and people. And the movies, and it blows you up, and people think, oh, he's the acoustic guitar guy. But I used to have dreadlocks down to my back. You remember that back in the day?
You cut him to be in the movie, right? Is that to be an Oh Brother?
Exactly, I did.
Which was
that was part of getting the gig.
That was a commitment right there.
Right.
I mean, you had been growing your dreads for years.
Right, and the electric guitar and the Marshall amps, that was my thing,
Right.
And I was a heavy blues rocker on electric guitar. And then that changed my image, and it's fine, because that's part of who I am as well. But Big Gray Sky is me getting back to the electric guitar and getting back to some 12-bar, some real standard blues things, to remind people that this is the essence of, what I express as a blues artist is the electric guitar. And in the next project, the next album will feature me doing a lot of the early classic New Orleans music, like I said, by like Lonnie Johnson, King Oliver and things like this. 'Cause these are early blues musicians that people call Dixieland jazz. But they don't call them Dixieland jazz anymore. They just call them jazz. But that's all. To me, calling the early New Orleans blues music, which the musicians never called their music Dixieland jazz until after that was imposed upon them. But the Dixieland jazz term is a Confederate term. And if you remove the word Dixieland and just remain with the word jazz, it's kind of like removing Robert E. Lee Circle and just say, we're just going to call it Lee Circle, and that'll be fine. You're still paying tribute to something Confederate, and it's not really how we, as Louisiana musicians, that don't represent I think it's better to call it the blues, and then later it was called jazz. Later it was called swing. Later it was called rock and roll.
Well, because the term JASS was used early on, before, even pre-JAZZ, I think, right? Didn't that term get thrown around a lot back in the early? In my
research, the word jazz doesn't appear in any African language, and there's hundreds of those. It don't appear in any Louisiana language in the 1800s, and it doesn't appear you know, people say it was used to describe a baseball game or something in San Francisco in 2000, I mean, in the early whatever. But then around 2015, I mean, I'm sorry, around 1915,
right.
Around 1915, it started appearing, you know, here and there. But really what we have is Dixieland jazz. When the blues band called the Dixieland Jazz Band recorded Live Restable Blues and had a hit with it, that is the beginning of the blues being on record, and they were a blues band. And the reason I know that is because there was a court lawsuit about who wrote the song, Live Restable Blues. And LaRocca and all those boys was in court in Chicago.
Nick LaRocca, yeah.
Yeah, and they were in court in Chicago, and the judge was, and they have the transcript, and the judge was asking, you know, who wrote the blues? And they were saying who wrote this song in the blues and who added this and that. And then the judge ruled that the song was a public domain song, so they couldn't get paid for it. And that, you know, African Americans, or they used the word black people or Negroes at that time, this is a song that black people had been playing for years, so they couldn't copyright the song and get the royalties.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure that pissed him off, you know, LaRocca, and he was pissed off to the end about that. But the term Dixieland jazz was imposed upon King Oliver. It was posed upon Jelly Roll Morton. It was imposed upon these people. And when Jelly Roll Morton tried to tell people at the Library of Congress in 1938 that the blues came from New Orleans, and he was the architect of it, that he was one of the inventors of it, and he did, and that W.C. Handy had stole his music, Whining Boy, and called it Memphis Blues or whatever he called it, he was telling the truth.
Yeah.
But everybody said he was a kook, and everybody kind of shunned him. And because at this time, they didn't even think that black people should have, he was trying to get his music registered with BMI and these collecting agencies, but black people couldn't have their music copyrighted or receive royalties for their music. And he was trying to say, these people, like W.C. Handy, is stealing my music, I need to be paid.
Right.
And so W.C. Handy, when he wrote his biography in 1941, he removed credit to Jelly Roll Morton because he would have to pay Jelly Roll Morton some royalties. And so Jelly Roll Morton was shunned, but, and just to wrap this little story up, recently, the guy, Yan Winter, that ran Rolling Stone all these years, a lot of stuff I had to dig and get into, a lot of stuff I had to dig and find, he just came out and just said it. You know, I said that, you know, this idea of primitivism and black people and certain women being intellectually inferior is kind of the whole game.
Right.
And if you are intellectually inferior, then what are you doing with intellectual property?
Right.
So it means that anybody can just take your music like you're a bird singing, whistling outside the window. The movies don't have to pay royalties to birds, you know, so why would we have to pay royalties to Jelly Roll Morton or to black people to use their music? And so rock and roll just said we could just take all this stuff like mining for gold, you know, melodies.
Right. Like it's just raw material that you can take and use.
Right. And Yan Winter came out and said that that's how he operated Rolling Stone all those years, that these people are singing the exact same song that the New Orleans musician or the black musician is singing, and they're calling it rock and roll, or they calling it swing, or they calling it this or that, and really it's just, they just singing the blues.
Just singing the blues. No, and Yan Winter, he famously said, and he was promoting his book of interviews with certain rock legends, and he said in a New York Times interview, well, yeah, I didn't include any interviews with black musicians or female musicians because they just can't articulate as eloquently and philosophically about the music as these guys could. And he, rightly so, got a whole lot of grief after when those comments came out. But it goes to the heart of what you're saying. And
Curtis, and he had the nerve to even mention Curtis Mayfield. If Curtis Mayfield don't fit your criteria of a musical genius, of a poet, of one of the most beautiful musical spirits ever, and as a fantastic underrated guitar player.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
yeah.
what are we talking about?
No, it was
Mick Jagger is your philosophical, you know.
I mean, you know, Rolling Stones are great and all, but yes, I mean, you know, but no, it was insane, and it.
But it's these kind of things, Keith, that when I came out with this book, I was thinking that it was going to be a lot of pushback from it. But I think that America is going through a situation now where we want to know more authentic history about America, and a lot of the myths and legends and things that have been fed to us, people want to say, well, this don't make any sense. So they want to know more. And I think that for once in my music career, or once in my career, usually sometimes my music has been ahead of the times or behind the times. But I think the book came at the right time. And I think that having some of this information come out, like what Jan Winter said, it just proves some of the points that are made about in the book.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I mean, look at it. You've had a 40, 50-year career just to put out this book right on time. So
yeah.
It's a really interesting read. I encourage everyone to read it. It's called The Blues, The Authentic Narrative of My Music and Culture by Chris Thomas King. Chris, this has been a really enlightening discussion. I hope people get the book and check out the history, and I hope they check out your new album, Big Gray Sky, and everything else you've done.
Yeah, and my website is christhomasking.com. The book's available at Amazon or in your local bookstore. And Big Gray Sky, I'll be bringing it to a club or a festival near you pretty soon.
There you go. Yeah. All right. Well, good deal. Well, thank you again for being here.
Thank you
to everyone for watching. Once again, I am Keith Spera. This has been Let's Talk. We'll see you again next week.